Boy, oh boy, the things that Karen Read has said to the press could come back and haunt her in court. Video and quotes from tell-all interviews are now being held against her in her second trial, like this one.
I mean, I didn't think I hit him, but could I have clipped him? Could I have tagged him in the knee and incapacitated him? He didn't look mortally wounded as far as I could see, but could I have done something that knocked him out and in drunkenness and in the cold didn't come to again?
And this would have been the moment you dropped him off at the party.
Yeah, would have had to.
But should a defendant's media statements be used against them? And if so, could they really sway a jury? That's what we're going to talk about today. I'm criminal defense attorney Sarah Azari, and on Serving Justice, I dig into what really matters in a criminal case, the defense. So, is this really a big problem for Karen Read? We're going to break it down soon with a panel of experts who are joining me. But first, I want to bring in NewsNation reporter Safiya Sami Ali, who's also an attorney and brings us a lot of history and context that we need. Safiya, good to see you. What do you got for us today?
We've got the trial of FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried, who was convicted on various counts of fraud in 2023. Now, Bankman-Fried went on this media blitz after FTX went bankrupt in an effort to show that he did everything he could to protect the company. He talked to the Wall Street Journal, he talked to the New York Times, he talked to Bloomberg, even though there was wide conjecture that he was being investigated by the Department of Justice at the time. In fact, hours before he was arrested, he gave an interview during Twitter Live saying, "I don't think I'm going to be arrested." Needless to say,
talk about arrogance.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, needless to say, prosecutors used those media interviews during his trial to show inconsistent testimony, to show admissions. I mean, it really tanked his credibility. Obviously, there was much more evidence, but these media interviews certainly did not help his case. He ended up being found guilty and sentenced to 25 years in prison.
And yeah, usually the high-profile defendants who have that urge and do it, against the advice of counsel are often the most arrogant ones, but it's never a good idea. And look, this is a very important constitutional right that we all have, is to remain silent. And we have that right, obviously, when we're confronted with law enforcement. And so you certainly need to invoke that and not voluntarily go out and, give media statements. What else do we have?
Yeah, we've got real estate millionaire Robert Durst, who was convicted in 2022 of murdering his best friend. Now, his interviews for the 2015 HBO documentary, The Jinx, ended up being a key factor in his arrest and conviction. Now, Durst was suspected in the 1982 disappearance of his first wife, 2000 murder of his longtime friend, and the 2001 killing of his neighbor. He was acquitted in 2003 in the murder of his neighbor, but was still on the radar for prosecutors. Now this is gonna be wild to you, in 2010 reached out to director Andrew Jarecki to offer up a sit-down, in-depth interview, which later became the documentary.
Oh, it was his idea. It was his
idea. Yes, exactly. And so there was a very infamous moment that came out of that interview where Durst excuses himself to go to the bathroom while still being mic'd up, and that's when you hear him kind of mutter to himself, "There it is, you're caught, what the hell did I do? Kill them all, of course." That, made it much easier for prosecutors to go after him. He was arrested hours before the premiere of the final episode of The Jinx. By then, filmmakers gave him more than 20 hours of footage from those interviews. Those clips from that documentary were then played at his trial. He was asked about things he said in those interviews at trial. Obviously, again, there was other evidence, but those interviews did not do him any favors. He was convicted in 2015 of first-degree murder. Later on, he talked about how much he regretted doing that documentary, calling it a, quote, very, very, very big mistake.
Yeah, it was very damning. And that with respect to his iterations on that hot mic, I was listening to your tone when you were repeating what he had said. And I can tell you that the defense at trial put on a very different tone on the same words to show that this is not really what he meant. This was not a confession. Sophia, thank you so much for this great context. And now I want to go to my panel. I'm joined by, of course, Durst's own criminal defense lawyer, my friend and esteemed colleague, David Chesnoff, also host of Pop Crime TV, DeLauren Conlon, who's been following this case from the very beginning, former lieutenant commander who was with the NYPD for over 21 years, Joe Cardinale. Hello, my friends. Thanks for joining me today. I want to go to David first, because obviously we just talked about Durst a little bit. I want to get your input on how you felt when you first learned about Durst's interview in that documentary, The Jinx. And other than, oh, F, what are we going to do with this? What was your plan? What was going through your mind when you learned that this was out there?
Well, the first thing I thought of was, I'm glad I wasn't his lawyer at the time he made the statements, because I never would have let him do it. Jarecki had made a real movie about the death of his first wife, and it played to Bob's ego, I think, and that's when Bob reached out and said, look, let me do an interview with you. My mom once told me that you have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so you listen twice as much as you speak. All the people you're talking about that make those kind of public statements, they obviously don't adhere to that, but a lot has to do with the fact that they're the kind of people who always direct traffic. So they think they can say whatever they need to say, and it's going to get them where they want to go. The problem that
you think it's a control issue, sort of trying to control the narrative.
Absolutely, and it's also ego. But in the situation with Bob, that was basically the reason he got arrested. I don't think he ever would have been arrested but for what happened on the Jinx. Everything was completely circumstantial as it related to all the other situations. And obviously, he'd never been prosecuted for killing his first wife. He'd won the trial in Galveston. So he basically opened himself up to the California prosecution. And Jarecki became like a deputy sheriff, the producer of the show. He worked directly with the prosecutors in Los Angeles, which raised some issues for him in the documentary world, because people were saying that there were questions about it. But Jarecki, when he went to interview Bob, his intentions, I think, were very pure. And I think he was as surprised as anybody else at what was said in the bathroom. And by the way, they didn't discover that right away. It was a long time afterwards. One guy who was in the production staff happened to be listening and said, holy cow, look what we have here. And you're right, we did try to emphasize it in a different way during the trial, but it was very, very compelling against Bob. And then, of course, our judge let all the evidence of the case where he was acquitted in, including some gross pictures. He allowed them to prosecute the wife's murder case, even though there had never been a prosecution. So it was a pretty overwhelming task.
I mean, it's interesting because I thought I knew a lot about this case because of my friendship with your co-counsel, Don Ray. And I never realized that this was the primary reason why he was prosecuted. So we're not even dealing with a situation where the statements are coming in, as evidence. It's that there wouldn't be sufficient evidence for John Lewin, the DA in this case, to even prosecute, because I remember he'd gone like decades without being prosecuted for his wife going missing. And then obviously they came up with the theory that she was murdered. David, given your experience with high profile cases, how do you prepare a client for the possibility that their media statements might be used against them? And if you have any, inclination to put the client on the stand because you feel their testimony is necessary, what does that do to that, consideration?
Putting them on the stand is a rarity. I lecture my clients when they hire me. They're not saying anything. If they've already made statements, we try to gather them, and then we sit with the client and try to work with them with respect to what they previously said. But as you know, putting a client on the stand is a rarity. So in those instances where you have to, it would be a misstep by a lawyer not to get access to statements. And now with the ability through social media to really hire somebody to collect everything, you can be prepared. and it's essential. But I'm telling anybody who's listening, having public statements, a short press release works, but letting your client talk.
But through your lawyer.
Yes.
Yeah, a press release through your lawyer and your PR,
100%.
not directly, right?
No, 100%.
Yeah.
And fortunately, most.
Yeah, and now, yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
just going to say, fortunately, most of my clients listen to me. And actually, if they don't listen to me, see you later.
Yeah, so you would, you'd have a problem representing Donald Trump because he would not listen to you. He'd be out there tweeting, right?
I wouldn't have a problem. I wouldn't have a problem representing Donald Trump. He seems to do pretty well when it comes to what happens to him. No,
right, exactly.
He's in a different position.
No matter what he said, The defense calls Michael Proctor a cancer, right? In their opening statements. I'm like, this is more like stage 4 metastasized, uncurable, awful cancer, because this is a lead investigator who was engaged in awful, horrific text messages about Karen Read they were just so off the hook, right? And so you were a law enforcement officer for a long time, and this guy's been fired by the department for violating the rules, right? How detrimental do you think Michael Proctor is to the prosecution's case?
I think he was very detrimental. I think that's an ace in the hole for the defense. He should have never been on the case to begin with. He had intimate dealings with people that he was interviewing. All right, this is what happens in small towns when you have people that are assigned to a case and you know them. He should have recused himself right off the bat and said to his bosses, I can't do this. I know these individuals, but yet he went ahead with it, maybe unknown to the supervisors that had to supervise this case. And then once the damage is done at the point of trial, it's like unbelievable the damage that he caused to this. And now Hank Brennan knows all this. He's sitting back saying, well, I have to go with what I have, and presenting the case in a different manner. But this guy was rightfully fired. And I think somebody else should have had this from outside the area, and they should have did a little more of a bang up job with this, because they left a lot for the defense attorney to chew on. And, Jackson's chewing on.
Right. Yeah. Lauren, in these media interviews that Karen Read has given, she really seems to be controlling the narrative, right? She didn't testify the first time. This is her opportunity to tell her story. And like David said earlier, that's the kind of high profile defendant that goes out and talks to media, is the one that wants to direct traffic, like David said. So do you think she's accomplished anything has she swayed the court of public opinion by these media statements?
No, Sarah. In my opinion, she has not accomplished anything but create some problems for her own defense team at this point. So I actually interviewed the director of A Body in the Snow, the ID interview, the 5-part series. I watched it. I have always erred on the side that the prosecution never met their burden. I was never convinced during the first trial that she hit him. I watched the docuseries, and look, it wasn't great. Her statements, they weren't great at all. I probably would have stopped talking.
Wait, so you changed your verdict after the documentary?
No, I definitely did not, because there's nothing there, I would say, that says that she murdered him. This is an overcharge, in my opinion, right. Second-degree murder. Right. And, I'm jumping around, but if you go to Hank Brennan's opening statements, where he deliberately said that, she pulls the car away 35 feet, she puts it in neutral, and then she backs up into him, clipping him. He actually uses her own words from the docuseries, clipping him. That is malice. That is murder. When you hear her talk in these documentaries, she's not talking like that. She's not sitting there saying, oh yeah, I was so angry that I, did this, I did that. She's talking too much, right? Don't get me wrong, but she's saying, well, I did have a little too much to drink. I mean, yeah, strike one. The heat was blasting. Could I have? I mean, you can interpret this any way as a juror. Is it a female thing? We blame ourselves all the time. I thought about that. But I was shocked when I did interview Terry Dunn-Muir about the docuseries. I said, how did this come about? And she said, well, Karen and her defense team, they approached us. So in my opinion, and my understanding here is that this was during the first trial. They really thought that she was going to be acquitted and that this was going to come out, everything would be finished. And look, Terry said towards the end of deliberations, when it was day 1, day 2, day 3, their demeanor changed. It was a lot more of like, hey, Terry, can we have the room? Can we have some privacy? So I thought that was really interesting. And then lastly, what Hank Brennan is trying to do here in court during trial 2, he is playing a lot of these clips. Some of them are out of context, and I think the jury.
Yeah, I want to get to that. Yeah, I want to get to that in a second, because I want the whole panel to react to this. Prosecutors showed a clip from a Dateline interview where Reed says, I don't think I hit him, super callous, like no remorse whatsoever. And she says, maybe I clipped him. Maybe could I have tapped him in the knee and incapacitated him? I mean, all right, one word reactions from each of you. I'll go to David first.
Unbelievable.
Joe?
I think it's compelling.
Okay, Lauren?
Shut up.
That's 2 words, but I'll take it. And apparently there are 44 of these clips coming, words coming out of Karen Reed's mouth that the prosecution is banking on. And I know, Lauren, you're keeping close tabs on this issue. These are being used against her, right? And do you think this is now forcing the defense's hand not to be able to put her up on the stand if they had any intention to do so?
I don't think it's a good idea that she goes on the stand. And I think that part of the reason she maybe wanted to do this is so she wouldn't get cross-examined, because that seems to be the simplest thing. She has always said that I'm an open book. I want to talk about what happened or what I think happened. So I think I saw Joe Tacopina comment on this the other day, and he said something along the lines of, Alan Jackson is dying inside, but it's going to be okay because this is a reasonable doubt case.
David, the most common 2 words that you and I hear when there is a retrial after a mistrial is double jeopardy. No, they can't do this. They can't do this, right? And so for our viewers, what is double jeopardy and why does it not apply to this retrial of Karen Reed?
Double jeopardy means if you were acquitted, and then 2 weeks later they find a video of you killing the guy, they're not going to be able to prosecute you in most places. I think in foreign countries that might not apply. But what happened in her case is she got a mistrial, which means the jury didn't reach a unanimous verdict, and that does not impact the concept of double jeopardy, unless, of course, the mistrial is caused by some kind of prosecutorial misconduct. And then you can make an argument consistent with the principles of double jeopardy that you shouldn't be retried again. But generally speaking, if there's a mistrial,
how many times can she be retried, David?
That they can retry you over and over again if it's a hung jury. Practically speaking, it doesn't happen. Either they work the case out or the state will walk away from it. But technically,
and that really depends on the votes, right? Like how many.
If it's 11-1, they're not going to. 9 out of 10 times they're not going to do it again. If it's split down the middle, they might. And in a case where they feel very strongly about the guilt of the person, there may be, or the politics of the case, they may be more inclined to retry it.
And I think there's politics here, right? You're talking about a small town. You're talking about a police officer. I think this is exactly the kind of case that I think the prosecution will not let go of following a mistrial. And this is to all of you. I'm like David. I don't believe a client should make any statements to media, to anyone. Nothing should be said to anyone except for the defense team. But I've heard other lawyers say, in this day and age of social media and mainstream media with true crime and the fascination with it, sometimes you need to use that power to spin the narrative in your favor. So you get a PR person, you might even let the client speak. This is to all of you, is there any good reason why a high profile client in a criminal charges pending against them should go out and talk?
I'll tell you that in those instances where there is actual factual innocence, it's conceivable that you could want that to happen, especially if it's somebody who's popular, that people like, that they know. I could see that set of facts and circumstances leading you to allow a limited denial, a limited proclamation of innocence, that kind of thing. That's the only situation.
Well, David Diddy did it on a date. Diddy issued a direct statement, not through his lawyers, and it came back to haunt him. But I guess to your point, he's not liked, so that might be why he's in a different category.
That's part of it, and also I mentioned the concept of factual innocence, which is different than beyond a reasonable doubt. So I think that and I'll tell you this, in these cases involving sexual allegations, especially when it's older men and younger women and violence, I don't know where you get any benefit by trying to defend yourself.
No, these are different times. These are very different times. And Joe, I'm not calling Karen Reed batshit crazy, but let's just hypothetically say you arrest this batshit crazy lady at the crime scene, right? You got her cold. She's persona A to you, right? And then months and years go by. There's media attention on the case. She's out there talking. Suddenly she becomes a celebrity. She has a fandom, and it's a whole different persona, right? How much have you noticed that the media can change public perception and just even in the courtroom of a high-profile defendant?
Well, I have to be honest with you. I'm listening to everybody, and I do that. I listen to everybody, and David's right. I mean, he's the attorney on record right now, and he's telling. I mean, I heard that Jackson actually wanted this interview, which I think David would have said, no, not right now. Let's do this afterwards. I believe that's what should have been done. This case reeks from top to bottom on both sides. All right, and I'll tell you why. As an investigator, if there's a spontaneous utterance that she made, I'm going to document that, and I'm going to have it by bona fide detectives that aren't affiliated with this case personally. All right, and that's the way you want it to go. In answer to your question about the high-profile cases, I mean, let's go back to OJ when it really started, and then you start progressing after this, and you go to a case you mentioned before that I followed from start to finish on Fox News. You sit back with Scott Peterson. He wasn't represented by anybody, and his interviews came back to haunt him. All right. So, and now everybody wants retrials and everything else. So I put all that on the side as an investigator. All right. And a supervisor of investigators. And I say, put that media on the side. Let's make the best case we can make. Put everything on the side and put your best suits on. Go out there and get the evidence we need to accomplish the end goal of a successful prosecution. This case is
without the media, just based on the evidence.
I put the media on the outskirts and say this is what we need. You'll see that in the Luigi Mangione case as well. That's a high profile case that you're going to have to follow, and the media, and it's tried in the media. And this case, have sympathizers.
I mean, he's raising funds for his. It's also his looks, though. That also
it
helps
is.
a
But you
little
know
bit,
what? I don't care how good looking you are or anything. You murdered somebody. You should be held accountable for it. In this case,
no, of course, I'm not. I'm not saying Luigi Mangione.
I agree, but what I'm saying is,
I'm not saying hot guys should get off with murder. Like, that's not what I'm saying.
No, I know you're not. But Scott Peterson's case leads into all this, the frenzy that followed that right after OJ. That was the next big one. All right. And they followed that. And now they have these cases. Her own words are going to come back. Here's what I think with the prosecutor Brennan on this. I think they're going to come out with a vehicular manslaughter charge with this that's going to stick if he can prove that nothing was tainted in the evidence that he needs to present. I think that's what comes out of this. I don't see her going for the murder.
But they are pushing.
I agree. I don't think this is more than vehicular. What? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lauren.
They are pushing the murder too hard, though. That's the thing with the voice messages and how angry she was. And so I agree with you. If anything, it's manslaughter because
vehicular manslaughter
would have accidentally hit him. But what Hank Brennan is doing, in my opinion,
I actually thought, after when when the jury was hung the first time, I said, why did the prosecution go for the jugular? I thought that was part of the problem, was that they didn't have enough for murder. They had enough for vehicular manslaughter, maybe. But
You're right.
the
Not Betty
but you know,
Broderick.
David, I just want to go back to this point of the media statements coming in as evidence. I know you guys did heavy motion work to exclude Durst's media statements from the trial. Is there like any basis where a court would say, yeah, they're inadmissible? Because it seems to me like in every case where this exists, it comes in.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the general concept that a judge is supposed to balance whether it's more probative or more prejudicial. Obviously, you'd be arguing that it's more prejudicial as opposed to present your evidence in court based on what, you know, if the guy gave a confession, use that, but don't take clips from a television show. And by the way, in Durst's case, we made serious arguments that they had edited things in an improper way also. So that's the balance that the judge is supposed to do. The problem is in these high profile cases, the judges know they're being watched too. And the high profile defendant doesn't get the benefit of the doubt that they should get. In the old days, for example, I've been doing this 45 years, so I've represented a lot of well-known people. When I started my career, you got all the breaks in the world if the person was well-known. You got it from the press, you got it from the courts,
right?
You got it from the cops.
We called it celebrity justice, right? Celebrity
right.
justice was the
it
term.
Changed. Yeah. Part of the reason it changed was OJ. There was so much anger that he was acquitted that now there's much more scrutiny. So you hear all the time, oh, he's getting away with it because he's rich. Oh, he's getting away with it because he's famous. So it's a lot harder now to represent the well-known person than it used to be.
Call it, David, I call it celebrity injustice. We went from celebrity justice to celebrity.
It's true. No,
yeah, but you know, it's interesting because when you said about the balancing test of what's probative versus prejudicial, I mean, I suppose if this was a fictional piece, right, and the person was acting, then that's, you know, you can't. I think this issue came up. I worked on the defense of Robert Blake many years ago, and I think it was an issue there because they were trying to bring in some of his, you know, series, you know, TV series, Beretta, and you know how he handled guns and what he did on the show, and we were able to keep it out. But that's different from a documentary and an interview in a documentary, which is, you know, literally confession after confession. So, Lauren, last word to you. What can we expect that coming up in the Karen retrial? What's happening next?
Oh my goodness. Well, it's already starting off, in my opinion, very interesting. Hank Brennan's pace is so much better than the former ADA Lally's pace. We're hearing a lot less about the snow. We're hearing from witnesses that, you know, we heard from during the last trial, but he's eliciting a lot more testimony out of them. And in turn, we're getting a better cross-examination. We saw the other day, you could say a witness didn't understand a question. Some people interpreted that as perjury, but it's getting pretty heated. And I think that this trial, like I said, it's going to continue to stay heated, and it's going to keep us all on the edge of our seats until it's over.
Thank you so much to all of you, my amazing panel. Thanks for joining me today. And we want to hear from you, the audience out there. What is your theory of the Karen Read case? What outcome are you expecting this time around? And do you think her words have changed your verdict of the case? Please join us again here on Serving Justice. And until next time, the defense rests.